So welcome back. We have a wonderful panel ahead of us, and I'm delighted to introduce the women who are going to be leading that conversation. But to tee it up, when you think about the numbers that we heard from Senator Hassan, from Congresswoman DeLauro, from Congresswoman Clark about the number of women running for office, what it looks like in this year of 2018, that is something that we've heard a bit from Danielle Kurtzelbaum, who we'll hear from in a moment. She's going to be moderating this panel, and we're delighted to have her here with us this morning from National Public Radio. And we heard about the women who were stepping forward and running, and we're going to see more of that. And this panel, which is entitled Tracking Women's Political Participation, looking at the numbers, will help us to inform some of the discussion today. The next panel discussion, I am delighted to welcome a good neighbor from across the construction. You may have noticed we've got a little bit of work going on out here on the peninsula. It's taking shape and it's on its way to being gorgeous and spectacular, but I am delighted that right on the other side is Ann Bookman, who has served as the director for the Center for Women in Politics and Public Policy at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, since 2013. Ann has 3 decades of experience in the academy and in government overseeing research on gender equity issues and family support. She was appointed by President Bill Clinton as Policy Research Director of the Women's Bureau at the U.S. Department of Labor, where she served as Executive Director of a bipartisan commission that studied the impact of the Family and Medical Leave Act on workers and employers. And we really are fortunate to have you over there, and I am delighted to have you with us today. And if you want to come on up. Also joining us for our panel discussion today is Amanda Hunter, who is Communication Director at the Barbara Lee Family Foundation, an organization with the mission to advance women's representation in American politics and the field of contemporary art as well. Last month, the foundation, in partnership with the Center for American Women in Politics at Rutgers University, launched a Gender Watch 2018, a new nonpartisan project to track, analyze, and illuminate gender dynamics in the 2018 election cycle. Amanda has overseen the communications team for the foundation since fall of 2017, including its digital strategy and media relations. Prior to joining the Barbara Lee Family Foundation, Amanda served as Director of Marketing and Communication at the Phillips Collection in Washington, D.C., and as Senior Press Representative at the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts in Washington. Amanda, would you come on up and join the panel as well? Thank you, Amanda. And I'd like you all to now join me in welcoming our moderator for this morning's discussion, National Public Radio political reporter Danielle Kurtzelbaum. Danielle has been reporting at NPR on a wide range of issues since 2015, with a particular focus on gender politics, demographics, and economic policy. Danielle, we can't thank you enough for making the trip up from DC to help lead this conversation this morning. I now happily turn this panel and wonderful discussion over to Ann, Amanda, and to Danielle. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you for having me, Dr. Grant, Ms. Kennedy. I appreciate it. There's so much New England cred in this room that you invited a Midwesterner in, and I think that's really lovely of you to bring in an outsider, you know? But yeah, I'm so excited to talk about this with both of you because, you know, I was just talking to Ann just before we got up here. I used to cover economics until just a few years ago. I always told myself I'm never going to cover politics, and lo and behold, I do. But one thing about politics is that it's so squishy. It's like there's something reassuringly grounded about numbers in economics. And so what I love is that we are doing a panel called By the Numbers, because that fact that Senator Hassan talked about, how more than half of the electorate is women, and yet only 1 in 5 people in Congress are women. And that is just a stunning discrepancy, and I think it's a fascinating question to get out of. First of all, why is that? You know, nearly 100 years after women got the vote, why does that discrepancy exist? And also, why does it matter? It's a question that can be very easy to jump over if you're an advocate for more women getting into politics. So that's the kind of stuff that I really want us to get into today. So maybe let's just start with the very basics, the both of you. I don't know which of you would like to start on this, but let's talk about, okay, what do women's numbers of representation look like in Congress and in Massachusetts right now, and how do we compare to the rest of the world?
Sure. So in New England, we have quite a range of representation. Here in Massachusetts, we have never elected a female governor. We have had a female governor, but we've never actually voted one in. Our neighbors in New Hampshire, I think Senator Hassan mentioned earlier, has an all-female delegation in Congress, which is so cool. But Vermont has never sent a woman to Congress. So we have some work to do in our region. Currently, right now, there are 23 women in the Senate, 83 in the House, 6 women governors, and 19 women who are mayors of top 100 cities. When Barbara started the Barbara Lee Family Foundation 20 years ago, only 16 women had ever served as governor of a state in the United States. Now it's up to 39. However, there's been 2,300 men who have been governors. So 46 women have already declared to run for governor this year, and with filing dates ahead, we expect more. And there's 36 gubernatorial seats open this cycle. So there are your numbers. I hate math, so.
Gotcha.
Okay. Let me just add to that. But first of all, I just want to welcome Dr. Mary Grant. It's wonderful to have a new partner here on Columbia Point. I apologize for all the piles of dirt. We don't like them either. They will go away, we are told. Anyway, to have somebody who has been advancing women's leadership in higher education and many other fields as a partner right here on Columbia Point is terrific, so welcome. And Mrs. Kennedy, thank you so much. I think you're really, to me, like a symbol of how much women can do politically and as public servants without even being elected. You are everywhere standing for women, standing for people who are disenfranchised. And I have to say that one of the things that thrills me about the Kennedy Institute, among its many, many virtues, is that when I go by here and I see yellow school buses, and I know how much you are doing to bring the next generation into civic life and civic engagement, I think it's just fantastic, so thank you. So Amanda has said a little bit about the situation in Massachusetts. We were going to sort of have Amanda focus a bit more on the federal picture and myself a bit more on the Massachusetts picture. It's a proverbial kind of good news, bad news story because we have, on the one hand, 25% of women in Massachusetts in the state legislature, and this is not a great number. And actually, in 1993, we had 23% of women in the state legislature. So you can see that from over 25 years, we have gained 2%. This is not acceptable. Another point I wanted to make about the state legislature is the very low number of women of color. And I think this is actually an issue that we need to talk about more. Right now, in the Massachusetts state legislature, we have only 3 women of color. And this is, lower than we've had before, and it's really a problem, and I think we need to address this. On the other hand, we do have some really good news here in Massachusetts. We have, as many of you know, for the first time, 6 women of color in the Boston City Council. This is historic. Yes. And these women are amazing. I think there are many in the room, and many of you know them. They are each passionate advocates for issues that they really care about. They're role models for younger women. It's no secret that the Boston City Council was a white male club for many, many years, and they are really changing history. Another good thing that's happening is that we have 4 out of 6 women in Massachusetts now who hold statewide office. This is the highest we've ever had of women holding statewide offices. So this is another piece of the good news. But I think we have to be really cognizant of the fact that we are still very low. We are nowhere near gender parity, and we have to figure out what we can do, especially for women of color, but for all women, to create not just parity, but equity.
Well, so let's get into that, right? Because if we don't have parity, and if we're in fact so far from parity, I mean, what is it that's keeping women and women of color in particular, or disabled women or any demographic of women out of office? Is it fundraising? Is it recruitment? Is it voters not picking them? Like, what are the barriers?
I think there are a number of structural barriers that women face. Women of color, in addition to facing gender bias, also have to contend with racial bias. On the flip side, one really exciting thing that we're seeing in this cycle are so many women stepping up to run from so many different backgrounds. And we know from our research that voters connect to women because so many women run for office because they see an impact of an issue rather than just looking in the mirror and thinking they'd make a good-looking senator. And so many women who have disabilities or who have children with disabilities or who are veterans or so many different backgrounds. There are mothers now who have lost children to gun violence who are stepping up to run for office. So that is on the flip side that we're watching very closely this cycle, and hopefully this will be the year that we can kind of change the face of politics and turn some of those stereotypes around.
So at the Center for Women in Politics and Public Policy, we've been asking this question for quite a while. And in 2015, we put out a publication called Profiles in Leadership. We did this in partnership with the Women's Pipeline for Change, which is an organization that is dedicated to increasing the number of women of color in elective office. And we did what really a first ever guide of all the women electeds at all different levels in Massachusetts who were women of color. And again, we saw this kind of good news, bad news situation. On the one hand, we saw that there were only, in 2015, 95 women of color that had ever been elected in the entire history of the Commonwealth. I mean, that is shocking. That is totally unacceptable. On the other hand, we saw the women of color who had run, who had stepped forward, were incredible public servants, contributed to economic growth, to educational and quality improvements, to better early care and education, to more affordable housing. They had championed all the issues that really matter to women and their families. And we did look at what some of the barriers were, and I would say, number one, probably fundraising. This is just a huge barrier that women of all different backgrounds face. Number two, when you run for office, usually you have to leave your job to run. This is a huge economic barrier. Aside from the fact that you have to go out and raise money for your campaign, you're losing your income. And there are many women of color who don't have another person to contribute to the household income. And finally, I would just say the lack of role models, because there have been so few women of color. I think now we're seeing more and more women of color stepping up, and in fact, we're seeing women really, I would say, challenging, I would say smashing the stereotype of what a woman in politics looks like.
And on that fundraising question, is it what, that these women they're not tapped into the donor networks, or they're not as tapped in as men are? Why is fundraising a difficulty?
Yeah, I think that a lot of men are part of, the proverbial old boys network,
right.
And they have, through their professional connections, their business connections, men who they can turn to and ask for money. And I think that a number of women we interviewed for the Profiles in Leadership book said, I have never had problem with fundraising for a candidate I was working on. I never had a problem saying, will you support so-and-so who's a really great candidate, but asking for money for myself, I've never done that before. And so I think that some of the programs that we're seeing emerging right now, programs that have already been in operation for a long time, like Emerge, and I know Ryan Olson is here in the audience, who are doing fabulous work. And now Ryan and I were talking actually at the breakfast about work that's being done to train people to work on campaigns. So not only to train women to run for office, but to train people how to work on campaigns, which very much has to do with fundraising, among other things, and media, and strategy, and so on.
Gotcha. So I want to zoom out and get maybe back way up and get to a very basic question that I imagine many women in here already have an answer to in their heads. But just to get at this, I was looking at a poll just before we got up here. It's a January poll from a few months ago from CBS News. And CBS asked people, okay, how important is it that we elect more women to office? And 39% of men and 54% of women said it's very important. 26% of men said it's not very important. 16% of women said it's not very important. Everyone else was somewhere in the middle. Which is just to say that this is not a settled question for people, that there should be more women in office, that, that sort of normative idea. Likewise, there's a huge partisan split. 77% of women Democrats and 19% of women Republicans say it's very important. So maybe let's just step back and look at that. Like, why is it important, do you think, if you think it's important, that is, for more women to be in office? Do women govern differently? What is it? Why is this a question we are asking?
I could spend all day talking about this, but
okay, let's do it.
So women do govern differently, as some of our speakers alluded to earlier. Women are more likely to reach across the aisle to get things done, to be more collaborative. And it's funny that you mentioned that poll, because we did research a couple of months before that and found that voters are very fed up with the status quo. And if voters believe that women govern differently, they're more likely to vote for a woman, because they see a vote for a woman as a vote for change. And one reason is because voters believe that women are in touch with their lives. And if you look around and you see all the women that are running now that have children and they're having many different campaign ads, there are pros and cons to that, but one pro is that that's a way to demonstrate that they're in touch with the lives of voters. So at the Barbara Lee Family Foundation, obviously we believe that having women at the table is essential to a vibrant democracy, and we also believe that representation should look like the population of the districts that the government officials represent. But we were really delighted in late 2017 when we did this research called Opportunity Knocks, because we found that now is an excellent time for women candidates. And for Democrats and Republicans, Republican women actually faced a lot of gains, specifically on issues that women are typically weak, like Homeland Security. And then Democratic women did very well on issues like healthcare and education. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. We can all poll till the cows come home. But I do think if you look around, it does seem like people are very fed up with the status quo and with white male government officials, and they're looking for change.
And I just want to get in a plug for that Opportunity Knocks report. I've been reading it. It is really interesting, and I highly recommend reading it. Sorry, go ahead, Ann.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is a real sense of urgency now that women feel about running for office, and that is shared by many voters in the country. I think that many people feel that our country, our democracy, is really in a state of crisis. That it's not only women's rights that are being attacked, women's right to choose is being attacked, but groups like immigrants, like religious minorities, like Muslims, Dreamers, DACA, young people, all these different groups are being attacked. And I think that women are feeling not only that it's important for them to run as women, but that they want to take a stand on what our democracy should look like right now, that it really needs to be inclusive, that it really needs to be equitable, that we really need to address the wealth gap. And I think that a lot of the grassroots movements that are going on are really impelling women forward to run. And it's not just the Me Too movement. I mean, I think that I want to say very importantly that I think the Black Lives Matter movement is also incredibly important. I think that, we started seeing an increase in communities of color, with men of color being shot in their cars, walking around in their neighborhoods. Now we're seeing things like, I don't know if all of you saw the unbelievably almost unwatchable video of a woman in Alabama, an African-American woman being dragged to the floor by police because she questioned whether she should be paying for plastic knives or spoons in a, fast food restaurant. There are just attacks on communities of color and people of color, women of color, that I think many women feel is a direct assault on them, whether they're a person of color or not. And they want to take a stand and they want to say, this is not American. And this is not the America that I grew up in and that I believe in, and I want to create change to make that equitable, democratic America.
Yeah, and just to add to Anne's point, Barbara always likes to say that women have always been the backbone of every social movement in history, and now we're seeing women out front leading these social movements. And the potential impact of this next generation of leaders that are stepping forward through these movements is really incredible, and we're excited to see where that goes.
Gotcha.
I'm sorry.
No, keep going, please.
No, I was just going to say that I feel like we are trying to create a tipping point. We're not exactly at the tipping point, but we are creating the tipping point. A tipping point is when you have a small number of changes that become so multiple, so many, that they actually create a qualitative, unstoppable change. And I think what women are doing in this election cycle is we are creating that tipping point. And after that, we're going to see a very different kind of electorate and elected officials.
Gotcha. So, I mean, we're talking a lot about this moment right now when we have a record number of women running for House. We will quite likely have a record number of women running for Senate. State filing deadlines just haven't happened yet. But I think it's really important to get at this question of this wave of women that we keep talking about and hearing about who are running for office. To what degree is it a wave of women running, and to what degree is it a wave of Democrats running, right? Because, I mean, we were just talking about these numbers that the Center for American Women in Politics at Rutgers put out some data relatively recently that showed that, 15.9% of candidates in 2016 for Congress, I believe this is, were women, and this is as of April. And this year, despite this giant jump we keep talking about, only about 22% of candidates this year are women. So, I mean, this wave is, like, there's still so much room for it. So, to what degree are we looking at just a surge in enthusiasm among Democratic women and men at the same time? Because that's kind of what it looks like, right?
There are definitely, and our friends at COP always I like to joke that they rain on our parade with this a little bit because they bring us back down to earth sometimes, and they need to, but there are definitely a lot of men stepping up to run as well. I think the difference is there's long been, maybe it's a myth, I'm not sure, that there's a confidence or an ambition gap with women that they have to be convinced to run for office. Right now, we're seeing women stepping up with that sense of urgency that there just simply isn't time to wait. And so women are challenging incumbents, or they're running for higher office, not taking the traditional path of starting at the school board or the board of selectmen, going maybe right for state rep or Congress. So that's where I think the difference is, because if women are told to wait their turn, I think that they've figured out that it's never going to be their turn. It's always going to be some guy's turn, and it's time to step up and throw their hat into the ring.
I see. You're saying there's a kind of qualitative difference, perhaps, between the women who are stepping up and the men who are stepping up this year.
Yeah, that, and our friends at all of the different training organizations have reported being absolutely inundated with requests, and they've been training thousands and thousands of women, and there are so many of those great programs around the country. So we know that a lot of women are training and stepping up to run at different levels, but certainly men are also stepping up too.
Yeah, I mean, we're also at the Center for Women in Politics seeing an increase in interest in running for office among our alumni from our graduate certificate program in gender leadership and public policy, which trains women for leadership positions in both the public sector and the nonprofit sector. And we're very proud that we had 4 alumni run in November 2017. We had not had alumni run recently, although we do have several alumni that are in the state legislature, but we had, and some of them won and some of them lost. I thought it was important that Congresswoman Clark talked before about it's okay to lose, but then you have to run again. But we have someone who was elected to the Cincinnati City Council, the first African-American woman ever elected to the Cincinnati Public Council. And our very own Denise Schultz on the staff of our center has been re-elected to school committee in the city of Franklin. So we're very proud of our alumni. And I think that, I just want to echo also what Amanda is saying. I think that many women now are not waiting to be asked. There was a common story, almost a cliche, that women had to be asked 7 times before they would agree to run. And I think now women are saying, they're not even waiting to be asked. They're just saying, they're picking up the newspaper, they're listening to the radio, they're looking at their social media, and they're reading one more outrage after another about what's happening in their country. And they're saying, I've got to jump in with both feet. I've got to run. And they're just moving ahead.
So, looking at all of those women, like you're saying, who decide, hey, I've got to run, and they've decided right now. I mean, a lot of the women I've talked to out there who are running for the first time, they cite Donald Trump's win. These are a lot of Democratic women, because those are a lot of the people running this year. And they cite Hillary Clinton's loss. But as 2016 recedes in our memory, I'm wondering about you guys' thoughts on this wave of women. Can it be sustained? Can it grow? Can it grow to, more types of women who are not running for office? Can it grow to Republican women? How does this get sustained, if at all?
So Barbara always likes to say that this isn't a moment, it's a movement, and it really feels like something big is stirring in American politics beyond just one cycle. Hopefully we will see this momentum continue. Opportunity Knocks also found that voters are open to women who have never held office before, which is great news for all of the first-time candidates who are running. What's important is just to highlight the work that they've done in the community. We also know that these women that are running are going to face a lot of additional challenges on the way that they're judged by voters simply for their gender. Women really have to work to prove their accomplishments and qualifications, while men can simply list points on a resume. Women have to really use action-oriented language and show I balanced a budget or I managed this much money. So that's one barrier. And the other, which I'm sure you've all seen somewhere, is that voters will vote for a man that they do not like but they believe is qualified, and they won't vote for a woman if they don't like her. So that's, and likability is a tightrope in a lot of cases. We have a likability study too on our website. So these women are going to face a lot of challenges, but they have opportunities as well.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think the issue of sustainability is really, really important. And it has lots of different components. I think one of the things we heard about earlier is the work of girl-serving organizations like the Girl Scouts, and there are many wonderful girl-serving organizations throughout the country in different communities. You can't start early enough, I think, to build a pipeline of girls, young women, college-age students, and after, who are interested in running for political office. And then I think we really need to talk about new approaches to fundraising. Emily's List has always been fabulous, but there's only so much money that Emily's List can raise. I think we've got to find new ways of raising money that are very localized, very community-based, and where people can contribute not just money but time. Because I think that one of the things in terms of sustainability is people finding time to work on campaigns, people seeing it as part of their civic obligation to work on a campaign, whether it's for a school committee member or a mayor or a person in Congress, but really seeing it as part of what you do as an American is to either donate money if you can, or donate your time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I got actually one anecdote to add to that. I went down and reported on that Georgia 6th District special election last year between John Ossoff and Karen Handel. And one thing that really struck me was that I met John Ossoff and I interviewed him, and he, seemed like a nice enough fellow. But I remember like watching the women who went out door knocking for him, and I realized like it was the women who were powering his campaign. It was genuinely stunning to see just how much the women in his district rallied behind him. They were the ones who were going to try to push him over the goal line in the end. And so I think that's a thing that gets underreported in some of this 2018 pink wave, so to speak, is it's not just the women running, it's the women behind the candidates who do an awful lot of this work, right?
Yeah, and I think that the first Women's March was a catalyst. Women marched, and then they organized on social media, they wrote letters, they contacted their members of Congress, and then took it a step further and started volunteering on campaigns and running for office.
I think one of the other things about sustainability also is mentoring, and that's part of what I think can really keep us moving forward. I think to bring young women to meet people like Congresswoman DeLauro and Congresswoman Clark is really, really important. Women need to see other women of color, of different genders, of different sexual orientations, or transgender women, just to see that women of many, many different kinds can run for office, and to hear the lessons from women who are experienced elected officials.
Gotcha. Okay, well that's all for the panel sort of segment of this, but I think we're going to open it up to Q&As. So if you have a question, raise your hand high, including in the balcony. We don't want to forget you all. We have a woman over here.
First, thank you for participating. My name is Josephine McNeil. I come from Newton, Massachusetts, where I did run an organization that developed affordable housing in Newton. I am now the co-chair, I retired, a co-chair of an organization that is advocating for housing affordability in Newton. But what I wanted to speak to was your comments with respect to women of color. Someone said it was astounding. I think given the demographics of Massachusetts, where I think African Americans are maybe 7% of the population, I think the lack of women of color is not so surprising. And the fact that people of color live primarily in Boston and Framingham, and I don't know what but those are the communities. But I think what happens in politics, at least my observation in Massachusetts, is that people, low-income people, or people of color, are not really reached out to participate in civic engagement. Therefore, when people run, they don't necessarily have the support. And I think that what's missing is the politicians need to go into communities of color, get people registered to vote. You've got to make people believe, and I don't think many people believe, that their vote matters or what they say. So if we want to have women of color involved in politics, then we have to reach out to the people who are most likely to vote for them. That's my comment.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I really agree with you, and I think, I don't know, there are a number of women here from the Boston City Council. I don't know exactly where you are, but many of those women, I think, are examples not only because they dared to run and they won, but because of the way they organized their campaigns. The amount of door knocking that they as individuals did, the amount of encouraging their neighbors and their friends and people that they went to church or mosque or synagogue with to come out and get involved in their campaigns, I think has been a real hallmark of all the women that got elected to the Boston City Council. And that is, they're not only role modeling yes, I'm a woman of color and I can run for office, but they're role modeling a new kind of grassroots, very activated, community-based, neighborhood-based campaign.
More questions? Oh, there we go.
Hi, my name is Damali Vido. I'm the Chelsea City Council President, and thank you for having me here today. I had my hand raised at the previous session for about 20 minutes, and I was really upset during the break because no one acknowledged me. And I really just wanted to bring up exactly what is being brought up and piggybacking off of what the previous speaker said. I think it's really hard for people of color to get involved into a system that has historically disenfranchised them. Thank you. And feeling as if though you can be a voice. I had the honor of running 2 years ago, and we had zero representation of my community. That's about 70% Latinos. We had not one Latino person on the city council, and so I ran, and I'm there, but I'm still up against the Old Boys Network, and I'm still challenging every day. So at the previous session, what I wanted to bring up was that if we're going to talk about women in leadership, it's important to discuss the intersectionality of LGBTQ, of size, of age, of language, of all the different things that. So there are enough barriers as a woman, but could you imagine being a big woman, a woman of color, a woman that's disabled, a woman that's older? So I just wanted to really, I'm sorry, but I didn't catch your name right here, but I really appreciate all of your comments were centered and kept the issues of women of color on the forefront. And I think unless every single voice is at the table, we as a country will never get anywhere. So I just wanted to thank you for that, and thank you for letting me speak.
And I just want to get at something you just said before that, Anne, about responding to her question about campaigns being more grassroots focused. It sounds like, to become more inclusive, just the very way we picture what a political campaign looks like is going to have to change. Am I hearing you right on that?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think that, one of the things that we've seen historically, for example, if you look at the Boston City Council, is certain kinds of male political networks. Some of them, unfortunately, although I'm very pro-union, very pro-labor, some of them based in the labor movement, because even in the labor movement, as progressive and important as it is, sometimes we have seen certain skilled trades being dominated by white men and so on. And so if your network is a group of white tradesmen, that can't be the kind of campaign that's going to elect a very diverse cross-section of women. So we really have to look at, because campaigns are really about coalition building. Campaigns are about identifying different constituencies, figuring out what their common issues are, figuring out different roles for different groups, and figuring out how to unite them around some common change agenda, I would say. And I think that the importance of a change agenda, in other words, not just the numbers, but really what does each campaign stand for, and going out and having town halls and meetings across kitchen tables and, in different community centers, and asking people, what's on your mind? What's it like for you getting up in the morning as a single mother trying to get 2 kids to work and getting to your job? What's it like for you? What do you need? Oh, you don't have any reliable public transportation. Okay, I'm going to make that a centerpiece of my campaign. So I think more and more our campaigns need to be based in the social knowledge of our constituents, our diverse constituents, and then building a social change agenda around that.
Okay, excellent answer. I can't top that. All right. Oh, I see a question way up here.
Hi, my name is Leah Glover, and I'm with Fairfield County's Community Foundation, the Fund for Women and Girls in Norwalk, Connecticut. My question is for Anne. Anne, what do we tell the next generation? the young girls from 5 to 7 years old who have different inspirations, inspirations in politics, fundraising, all of those different behind the scenes positions that will even help them later on in life to be able to inspire to do some of the things that they talk about right now in our small groups. The Fund for Women and Girls, that's what we do. We help young girls and we help young women who come from low economic backgrounds to be able to reach those goals that may not be readily available to them with someone who has my background with education and come from good families and things like that. What do we tell the next generation?
Well, I think that, that's a great question, and I also want to just take my hat off to your foundation. We've been working with your foundation on our New England Women's Policy Initiative, and we're very grateful and appreciative of your work. I think that part of the challenge of talking to young girls is to try to, on the one hand, tell them honestly about some of the obstacles, because we can't just be saying, rah, rah, do it. We have to talk about systemic racism. We have to talk about systemic sexism. We have to talk about some of the obstacles that they're going to face. And then I think we have to introduce them to as many young women and older women as possible who all look completely different and look like them, and say, this is how somebody that in your community managed to go from just being an activist in her neighborhood to getting elected to her school committee or being elected mayor. So I think, again, that issue of role models, but I would say balancing some of the things that people are going to be up against, because if you just encourage girls and you don't tell them it's a fight, because it is a fight. And I think the intersectionality perspective makes it even more of a fight. So again, I would just say balancing sort of the struggle and the gains that can be made and the change that can be realized and the kind of society we can all build if we come together.
Okay. We have a question here. We have a mic coming to you.
One, to teach them how to get elected, but then teach them how to do the job. And that support is vital, especially for young elected officials of color or women of gender. So there's a couple of women mayors here, 3 women mayors here, but that is the key. They need a support system once they get in, and you touched on it, Ann. But because it's a very lonely job if you don't have people around you to help you. Thank you very much for everything you're doing.
Okay, one more, and I saw this woman's hand just go up. So.
Hi. My question is, I feel like we are consistently talking about young women, and then we're talking about women that are looking to run for office, but we're forgetting college-age women and women from 18 to 24, and how we foster and make them believe that they are capable and able to be in leadership and do things that historically women aren't doing. Just kind of.
Well, I mean, I think there are a number of organizations, national organizations, that are addressing just that age cohort. I know at the Center for Women in Politics, we are partnering with Ignite, which is one of these national organizations for our New England Women's Policy Conference this coming November 16th, in case anybody's interested in coming, because we feel it's really important to have a special track for college-age women and women in their early 20s. To teach them about running for campaigns, working on campaigns, and about public policy. But there's other organizations. There's Vote, Run, Lead, and I'm sure I'm forgetting 5 other ones. But there are organizations out there, and I would suggest for anybody who's running for office locally or nationally that, you do a little homework and find out, what those organizations are so that you can tap into their local chapters and call them and get them involved in your campaign.
Yeah, there are a number of incredible training and incubator programs across the United States. Vote, Run, Lead, She Should Run, Running Start, Run for Something, that are all doing really important training. And also millennial women, it's really important for them to get involved. That's a little bit older than 24. But when you look at the average age in the House of Representatives is 57, and the average age in the Senate is 61. And in 2019, millennials are going to take over as the largest living adult generation. So we're seeing some millennial women stepping up to run now, but hopefully we'll continue to see that trend.
Right, yeah, it's all about getting that light to even go on in someone's head, that it occurs to them to even run for office, which just doesn't happen with a lot of young women, I don't think. But, all right, I feel bad because there are other questions, but we have to wrap it up. But come find us over lunch. I don't know about these two. I'm happy to talk to you more about this. But thank you all.